Hi everyone, I am Anthony Diaz, part of the working group on Let's Connect. Just like one of our speakers today, I am also from the ECF region. I would like to welcome you all to today's exciting learning session on awareness and education on copyright by Wikimedia Indonesia and Wikimedia Sweden. We have two of the best Wikimedians in our community as our speakers today, Rahmat from Wikimedia Indonesia and Eric from Wikimedia Sweden, and I believe we can learn a lot from them at the end of this session. So let's have the slides for the Let's Connect culture. So Let's Connect is a venue for Wikimedians to share skills and learn capacities that would be beneficial both for their affiliates and their community. So though we may have discussed too many technical subjects, don't forget that you are also here to enjoy this collaborative space, which we are always free to share. We'd also want to ensure that everyone will be comfortable when they share their thoughts, either through chat or whenever they are speaking. And you may have attended our previous clinics, or this may be your first one, but we invite you all to learn new things here, and we also hope to learn from you. So there are two expected learnings we have for this session. First is to learn initiatives we may take to raise awareness or advocate for copyright challenges. Next would be learn from the best practices of Wikimedia Indonesia and Wikimedia Sweden, something that we may want to adopt in our groups and communities. And for our agenda, I've already provided you with the background of this session. Next will be an icebreakers who we may all feel participative. Then we will hear from Rahmat with regards to the Wikimedia Indonesia case study. After that, if we can collect questions, our speaker will try to provide you with the answers. We would also hear from Eric in connection with the Wikimedia Sweden case study. Then the question and answer portion will follow, and a presentation of the toolkit and resources will be done by the two speakers. Then after that, a goodbye to those who have joined us at our clinic today. So for our icebreaker, let me call Lucy.
Thank you, Anthony. It's so nice to see you all here. Just to remind you all that there is interpretation available. To access the interpretation, you click the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And today we have interpretation in English, Chinese, Japanese, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. Both presentations will be in English, so if you have a preference for one of the 5 interpreted languages, that is how you tune in. So today's icebreaker, if you could click into the Jamboard, Chin, that would be great. And there's a link to the Jamboard in the chat. Today's question for you is, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear copyright? Feel free to share what it means to you and your culture in general. So what is the first thing you think of when you hear copyright? It does not have to be something positive, negative, perfectly defined. Just what is the first thing you think of? To add your thoughts, click onto one of the colored post-it notes and you'll be able to write there. I'm just going to do one post-it note and you'll see it comes up there. Now you can feel free to delete my little ramblings there, but that's how you do it. So this is anonymous, and it's just a question of what do you think of when you think of copyright? And we're going to give you 4 or 5 minutes to fill this in, so you don't have to rush your answer, but we do love to hear from you. If you can't work with the Jamboard, please feel free to put your answers in the chat. I'm going to share the Jamboard from my screen just for a moment so we can see it getting filled in. So here are your answers coming in. If you want to use the Jamboard and you haven't before, You just click on one of these post-it notes and write your message like this, click save, and it will come in. And if you want to edit or delete, you can just do that and it will become blank again. So what do you think of when you hear copyright? And if you want to add a new post-it note, just on the left-hand side here, you can click on the little note and it will add one for you. And you can pick your color, and the color is available. So far we've got property, pay creators, sharing prohibited, the right to be the one that makes money with it. Yes, money and pay have come up twice here. That's really important. Respecting creators' work. So creativity is something people think of. Restriction. Yeah. Copyright means it's not possible to do copy for some reasons. Yep, that is also completely correct. Although I should say there are no wrong answers here. It's really just what you think. What is copyright like in your culture? Is it something that is widely accepted, or is it something that your culture works differently? Creative Commons, yes. I think we've got Evelyn here as well, who I know is very involved in Creative Commons. I'm currently doing one of their courses, so I'm thinking about copyright a lot at the moment. Protection, that's another key part of it. We've almost finished out. Okay, do you know what? I'm going to delete my hello, I am writing on a post-it note. I feel like that probably hasn't really contributed to the critical discourse here. Someone can have my orange post. I like this. Somebody has added a picture of a massive fire. If you'd like to add a picture, you can do this. And if you click add image, they say a picture paints 1,000 words. And you can actually do search Google Images this way. So when I think of copyright, I think about rules. So what comes up for rules? Oh, this person has a clipboard that says rules on it. They're definitely annoying. So let's put them there. And a Jamboard doesn't have to be neat, so you can absolutely drag and put things in different places. So again, if you'd like to add an image rather than some words, click on to add image, and through Google Images, you can find other things. So what else do I think of when I think of copyright? I think I get scared when I think about copyright, worried that I'm going to do something wrong. Here's a person who's scared. I like this person here. I relate to this person. Let's insert. Maybe this person has just put something on Wikimedia Commons and is worried that it shouldn't be there. I'm going to give you one more minute just to put any other thoughts you have about copyright here. Copyright is a grayscale zone, not clear rules. I think that's really important. Yeah. There are exceptions to copyright. There are granular aspects of the rules that are harder to get our heads around. Oh, someone's filling in the last post-it note. I love this. I was like, don't leave a blank. Lawyers, yes. Let's see if I can get an image of lawyers. Most of my life is searching for Google Images to put on. Here we go. Here's a group of lawyers. They all look really pleased. Maybe they're copyright lawyers. Okay. This Jamboard is going to be open throughout the session. Later on, you will be prompted if you have questions for either of our presenters. We have space on the Jamboard for you to put your questions in. I can't quite, just because of how, there we go. If you click to the right, you will see questions about the Indonesia case study, questions about the Sweden case study. So if you'd like to put any questions in there, please do. And if you have any further thoughts about copyright, please feel free to put them in this part here. And again, you can just drag and drop. I'm not shout out to Chin, who made some really lovely post-it notes in here, but it's here to be played with and to be moved around. So I'm going to pass back to Anthony now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask Chin to share her screen again. And Anthony is going to introduce the first of our speakers.
So let me introduce our first speaker from Wikimedia Indonesia, Mr. Rahmat Wahidi, the General Chair of Wikimedia Indonesia. Rahmat, you are now welcome to share your presentation.
Thank you, Anthony. Hello, everyone. Good morning, Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm here as the sharer and happy to share of some of our advocacy work that we have been doing in Wikimedia Indonesia related to the copyright. As you can see that Wikimedia has already been around for of 14 years in Indonesia, and we have done so many activities, and one of them is about advocacy related to copyright. In the next slide, you can see that our first advocacy will start from claim-related activities. For example, that you can move forward to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So in 2014, Wikimedia Indonesia established an initiative on content digitization to target books that could serve as references for Wikipedia contributors in Indonesia. At that time, we would like to digitize some contents, for example, from magazines and also reference book, like dictionary of local language in Indonesia, because access to this material is often limited to some of the Wikipedia contributors in Indonesia. Some of the limitation posed by the contributors is that they have to be they have to visit public libraries in their cities or in their places, because only in the libraries they can find some of material that they are looking for. But some libraries in Indonesia is not quite perfect, because the number of collection from the library is also limited. At that time, Wikimedia Indonesia wanted to do something to accommodate the needs from the contributors. One of our initiative is to digitize some of the collection, the reference book, the library, the dictionary, and also the encyclopedia that has that still in copyright period to be accessed by the Wikipedia contributors. In the next slide, that you can see at the time some of the reference book is kinds of a trial run, because we don't know that our efforts can be benefit for the Wikipedia contributors. But at the time, we also invite Wikimedia Indonesia members to lend their book to us in order to be digitized, and some of them were happy to bring the books and also the encyclopedia for us to be scanned. But the result of the digitization is not uploaded or is not stored in Wikimedia Commons because they are still copyrighted. And at the time, we built a customized repository called Bebaskan Pengetahuan, or in English, we can say free the knowledge, just like we have already heard about this term. And the ones who can access the repository is the Wikimedia Indonesia members and also the personnel that involved in the digitization, because we did some advisory. For example, if they want to use the uh, to access some of the collection from the Bebaskan Pengetahuan repository, they cannot spread, they cannot copy, they cannot distribute the content from the library because it is still limited. In the next slide, you can see that we set up our customized repository in Mirahes, and we store in the repository some of the books ranging from the topic from religion book and also the language book, some of the tale story books, and also encyclopedia, some of the law and the Indonesian law also stored in the repository. We also digitize dictionary, comics, and also some of the um, magazine that is still in the process of completing the digitization before we upload to Commons. We also stored it in our repository before we upload it to Wikimedia Commons, because at that time the number of the magazine is quite huge, and if we plan to do uploading to Wikimedia Commons in a batch. And also we have already put some of the digitization of Japanese works, Japanese books, because at that time, one of our Wikimedia contributors, also Wikimedia Commons contributors, also initiate a relationship with a local museum in Yogyakarta, one of the places in Java Island. We digitize around 20 or 30 books in Japanese language, and at that time the books were still in copyrighted, but some of them is already in the public domain. So the ones still copyrighted is stored in the Bebaskan Pengetahuan repository, but the ones who are in the public domain is already uploaded to Wikimedia Commons. We also invite some of the organizations, for example, press organization that they want to digitize, or they want to archive some of the or some of their publications to Wikimedia Commons, but after we check the collections or the publication that they already has is still copyrighted. So we take the publication out of Wikimedia Commons and put it in our repository before, and we will wait the publication to be in the public domain, and then we will upload it to Wikimedia Commons. And after that, in 2015 or 2016, Creative Commons Indonesia start joining our office. At that time, we shared our office with them, and they already has some of the staff member, but they are focused in other things beside Wikimedia Indonesia. But because they have their own project at that time, but we also collaborate in the common initiative. For example, in making some of the publication that are related to copyright, because previously Creative Commons Indonesia and also the people previously that involved in Creative Commons Indonesia also socialize or making public awareness about copyright issue. At that time, they has already um, made some initiative before we collaborate in doing some in some content creation. In the next slide, you can see that there are some posters and also some brochures that you can find it in the Wikimedia Commons, and then you can download it. But unfortunately, they are in Indonesian languages, and the brochure and the uh, banner, we printed the banner and we usually bring them to everywhere that we do the socialization in other places in Indonesia. And also for the brochure, we usually distribute it to our participants, either in Creative Commons Indonesia event or in the Wikimedia Indonesia events. Because at the time we already initiate Wikilati, the initiative to make to train public to Wikipedia projects. So at the time, usually when we host Wikilati session or Wikipedia training session, we usually distribute the one on the right, the brochure to the people to make sure that they understand the basic understanding about copyright. And in the next slide, you can see that Wikimedia Indonesia and also some member of the Creative Commons Indonesia, we collaborate with other institutions in Indonesia, non-profit institution, which was focused on cultural advancement. They invite us, Wikimedia Indonesia, and also Creative Commons Indonesia to remote area in Indonesia to socialize about cultural advancement in Indonesia and also the copyright issue, because at the time the cultural advancement because at the time Indonesia regulation advanced the cultural creation, and the government wants to increase some of the Indonesia cultural aspect to be public, to be publicized in the internet. But in the same time, they also need to know about how the cultural materials or the cultural aspect can be benefit for others instead of making other people restricted to use some of the cultural thing. But at the time, we were hosting some of the socialization session. We also invite one museum in the place to digitize some of their collection. As you can see in the slide that we on the left, you can see that we do the socialization, but on the right side, at the photo on the right, you can see that one of the museum staff is doing the photograph about to photograph the museum objects. And you can see that some of the collection from the museum is already on Wikimedia Commons. You can see that in the category that I have provided in the slide. And then in the next slide, you can see that some of the initiative that or or collaboration between Wikimedia Indonesia and also other local museum in Indonesia. We compile it in one brochure, in pager brochure, to make sure that their initiative is published to Wikimedia contributors or Wikimedia community, so that they can use or they can utilize the collection that already digitized and also already in Wikimedia Commons. I can provide you the link to Wikimedia Commons if you are interested to make use some of the collection that we have digitized from the museum. In the next slide, you can see that, yeah, in the next slide, you can see that we have some endeavors, some journeys in introducing copyright.
One moment, Rajmat. I think
Yeah.
bandwidth can be on and off, so give us one moment. One moment.
Yes, no worries.
Rana, are you able to share your screen?
Thank you.
Am I on the good slide?
Yes. You can try to the next slide, please. Next one. Next. Yes, of course. Thank you. Thank you, Gorana, for sharing the slide. So we have some journeys in introducing copyright to public, but in this kind of public, we can say that it is not public, general public, but we also try to focus on Wikimedia communities and also some partners that we have already collaborated with them. But the general public is still, like some kinds of start still begin. So in the next slide, you can see that there are some efforts that we have been doing with Creative Commons Indonesia. People are trying to see that how we can utilize on how we can use the public domain materials or resources of Wikimedia Commons to another kind of works. So Creative Commons Indonesia staff member are trying to make use some of the photograph from Wikimedia Commons, and then they took it to be and they make it to be some of the postcard, as you can see in the slide. So this is one effort that we can show to people or show to the public that you can make use or you can utilize some of the materials, for example, photograph or other kinds of material that is already in the public domain, or and you can see in Wikimedia Commons to be a new works for you to share to the public or for your blog post, for example. And then in the next slide that you can see, this is the description on how we can use some of the materials from Wikimedia Commons. And if you are curious to see others other photograph in Wikimedia Commons, you can click in the slide after this session. And then in the next slide, you can see that there are some of the efforts being taken by Creative Commons Indonesia members in making public domain catalogs. So these catalogs provide some of the works that already located in Indonesia that have entered the public domain. So the catalog was made over 3 months during the pandemic era. So we fortunately showcased this in our public domain day celebration in 2021. And then you can see also the catalog in the link that I have provided in the slideshow. In the next slide, you can see that we also invite one artist from Java because he is interested to make some visual reconstruction on how they can utilize the public domain photograph from Wikimedia Commons. So his name is Moki. He was interested to some kinds of how the people in the photograph because the photograph itself resulted from the during the Dutch colonial era in Indonesia, and some of the people from the Dutch also merging with the indigenous people in Indonesia, and there are some kinds of visual reconstruction that made by the artist to show that this is the effort that the people from the Dutch how they can merging or blend with the indigenous people in Indonesia. For example, that they use traditional clothes, kebaya, for example, as you can see in the picture. Women, the woman is wearing the kebaya, and also the people who are sitting on the ground is using the Javanese traditional clothes, traditional wearing. And also in the next slide, you can see that Wikimedia Indonesia, the next slide, please. You can see that Wikimedia Indonesia through the GLAM division also adapting one booklet to provide introduction to Wikimedia Commons, and also we incorporate some of the brief explanation about copyright according to Indonesian copyright law number 28 in the year 2014. So if you are interested to learn more, but I have to advise you that this the booklet is in Indonesia. You can download it in the link that I have provided slides. So I think this is my last slide. The next slide, please. Yes. So what we learned so far, we know that the journey is not yet far, and the campaign to introduce the copyright law to grant organization and the public and also the government still has the long way to go. Why we say that this is still not far, because the public in Indonesia, we recognize that they are not understand thoroughly about the copyright issue and how they can choose the right copyright. For example, in the copyright and the Creative Commons spectrum. We have to do some socialization and introduction that if you want to if you want to publish your works to internet, for example, to your social media, for example, you have to make sure that you need to state what provision that you provide to the user that will use your work, for example. So we have to make sure that they already understand about the basic copyright concept and how the copyright can secure their work from the like from the abuse. And also the annual celebration of Public Domain Day is one of our special opportunity to engage with the public about copyright. As for now, Wikimedia Indonesia has already organized 5 sessions, 5 years of Public Domain Day celebration from 2020 until 2024. So one last month in January. So in January, we collaborate with Goethe Institute Indonesia, and we invite one lecturer from the famous university in Indonesia to talk about copyrights and how the AI generative content will affect to the creators, for example, and for the public. So the lecturers, the speaker, also state that the issue about the AI is still debate within the government in Indonesia, and we still need to have audit from the official about how they stand within the AI and also the copyrights. And also we invite Sonia from the Germany to talk about AI in the museum, how AI can expedite the works of the museum staff in Germany. So she was attended the event last month to talk about this and to share her experience in working with AI and the museum that she was working for. So I think that this is my last slide for now. If you have any question or anything that you need to know about our effort, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing all that information and pictures, Rahmat. Those are really exciting activities the Wikimedia Indonesia is doing. So now, if anyone from the participants has a question, you may raise your hand, type in on the chat or on the Jamboard, and Rahmat will provide us with the answers or further explanations. And as of now, we have 2 questions in the Jamboard. Let me read the first question to you, Rahmat. Is it easy to understand in Indonesian law when our work is in the public domain or not?
Thank you, Anthony. So responding to the question that our current Indonesian law based on our collect from the Creative Commons Indonesia, they said that the provision about the public domain in our law is still debating because there are some kinds of loophole in the law that this is still it is not really connected with the concept of public domain in general because as far as I understand that public domain concept in Indonesian law, but correct me if I'm wrong, it say that you need to still credit the creators or the author if you use their public domain works, the works that are already in public domain. But if I'm not mistaken, that the public domain provisions in general that you don't need or you are not obligated to state or you need to credit the author in your like, if you use the public domain works, you don't need to credit the author if I'm not mistaken. So there are some kinds of provision that in the Indonesian law is still I can say that still need to be improve, but at the time that the provision about the public domain in our law is already good for now.
Thank you for providing a clear answer, Rakmat, and I hope the question was also answered well. And for the second question, um, wait, what are the biggest problems in the copyright law for GLAMs?
Well, this is I'm not sure that this is our sole problem or challenges when we are talking about the copyrights to GLAM. But in Indonesia, if you want to collaborate with them, for example, if you want to join forces to digitize some of the collection, they say that the collection uh, is uh, is owned by the museum. But in our observation that we see that some of the collection is not from the museum, but they also collected from other people in the field, and the museum showcased them to the public. And when we find some of the interesting publication, for example, the magazines or the books that already in the public domain, they said that they can allow us to digitize, but if we want to publish the collection that we have digitized, we uh, have to state that this is their own, or if or in other words that they claim that the books or the magazine is owned by them, not like just like collected by the museum. So this is one challenge that we face in the field with regard to digitize some collection from the museum. And besides the challenges, we see that the museum itself also afraid to publish the collection to the internet, even though it is already in public domain or not covered by copyright anymore, because they are afraid that people uh, don't want to come to the museum again. And this is this situation we understand, because they usually use the collection as their uh, some kinds of income for the museum to catalog or to maintain the museum itself. So this is some of the challenges that we face regarding the um, our efforts, our collaboration with the museum. But the interesting part is that when we talk about the museum or local GLAMs, we are happy to work with the local GLAM, not not affiliated with the government, because their bureaucracy is quite easy for us to collaborate. But there are some challenges that when they are affiliated with the government, because there are some bureaucracy that we need to fulfill. We have to meet with the higher official people in the museum or in the GLAM institution before, and then we introduce ourselves, just like this is Wikimedia Indonesia, and this is what we are doing right now, and we are currently interested to collaborate with your organization or your museum to uh, digitize some of the collections. So we have to synchronize our objectives between Wikimedia Indonesia and also uh, the claims institution. So I think that there are some other challenges as well, but this is the general or the usual issue that we face when we are trying to work with the claims institution.
Thank you very much, Rahmat, for sharing your experience. We still have one last question, but to give way for our next speaker, you may answer this one at the later part of the session. So, Lucy.
Thanks so much, Anthony. If you want to, Anthony, go for the last question. I don't want to interrupt your flow, so I'm happy for you to take that one to Rahmat now, and Eric and I can start in a moment.
Sure. So I'll read the question for you, Rahmat. Has becoming more active on these topics helped Wikimedia Indonesia in other ways like partnerships, fundraising, etc.?
Yeah, regarding this question, I think that become active in copyright advocacy and also collaborate with the institution like Creative Commons Indonesia and also Goethe Institute Indonesia. This organization has become our pivotal organization that help us in advancing our advocacy regarding the copyright. So when we join forces with them, we usually have or maintain a new relationship with other institutions. For example, in the next week, we also would like to host a session about the general intellectual property topic to our Wikimedia community in Indonesia to introduce them to general topic of the copyright. But before we talk about the copyright, we have to make sure that they know about the IP and also other kinds of topic that they want to know before the copyright. So at this time, we see that becoming active in this area, it helped us a lot to do some advocacy or some publication or some awareness for the public in understanding how the copyrights are working in Indonesia and how Wikimedia projects can be like a tool for them in publishing their works either to Wikimedia Commons or to other projects, for example, Wikipedia. So I think that's my response to the questions.
Thank you for the inspiring story, Rahmat, and we look forward to seeing those projects you had mentioned. So I'll give it to Lucy now.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to hand over to Eric Luth, who is one of our most valued contributors here at Let's Connect. He's done a lot of brilliant presentations for us this year and last. Eric's going to be using a slide deck today, and I'm just going to put in the chat links to this slide deck in all the different languages. If you have access queries about them, just say in chat and we will try and change the settings, but they should all be viewable. Just to remind you, we do have translation and interpretation available in Japanese, Chinese, Portuguese, Spanish, and French that are available via the interpretation button below. With that, I will hand over to Eric for his presentation.
Thank you, Lucy, and I'm really excited to be invited to talk a bit about the copyright advocacy that we have done in Sweden for the last few years. I hope everyone hears me well, and if there's at any time that I will that I bring up things that I don't understand or I'm too unclear in explaining what I'm saying, please just pop a question in the chat or otherwise, so I will try to clarify. In this presentation, I'll try to give a brief overview of the journey that Sweden has done, or that Wikimedia Sverige has done since 2016, to from being in a really poor situation to becoming what I think is one of the central actors when it comes to copyright advocacy in Sweden. Before I do that, I just want to say, if you think that the title of this presentation is a bit too bombastic, then don't blame me, blame ChatGPT. I tried to come up with something creatively myself, but failed. Also, I think that a few words on the image that I use as a background could be enlightening. It's obviously a statue. If any of you took part in Wikimania 2019 in Stockholm, then you might have seen this statue. It's just outside of the city hall in Stockholm. But it depicts it's also very much out of copyright, so there's no issue with freedom of panorama or anything at this point. But it depicts a Swedish farmer rebellion in the 14th century that brought a lot of fellow farmers to Stockholm to make a rebellion against the king, who levied them with way too high taxes and very restrictive laws and whatever it might have been. And sometimes I feel like the Wikimedia movement is a bit like this farmer rebellion, who kind of a lot of people that might not have too much resources or not too much always experience, but a lot of passion and a lot of involvement. And if we're just able to channel this involvement and passion, then we can actually achieve great things. Sounds France more than Sweden, and yeah, it's Sweden has a perhaps rebellious history as well. Anyway, I'll start to just go through a few of the learnings that we have done, like for our active advocacy, and then when I've explained what we have learned during those 8 years, I'll try to give a brief overview over the journey that we took. So we can go to the next slide. And I'll bring up 3 different things that I think are crucial when you want to make advocacy in general, but especially perhaps copyright advocacy. And the first of those 3 things that I think that are crucial is knowledge. If you want to be successful in the advocacy work that you are doing, then you need to know the topic that you are focusing on. The first step, I think, in getting knowledge is to choosing an issue. What is the issue that you actually want to advocate for a change around? You can't do everything at once. Perhaps you need to choose a few different issues that are really a big hurdle in the work that you are doing. And when you have identified this issue, start to brainstorm like how this issue actually could be solved. Which are the legal issues, or which are the policy issues around the issue that you have identified. Another thing that is really crucial, I think, to know is what windows are open. Like, all legislative processes look very different in different parts of the world, like the ways in which laws are actually written or policies are changed. But if you want to actually reach a change, then it's important to understand, I think, how the procedure, what the process looks like. Is there an open window? Is there a legislative reform ongoing around the area which you want to change, or do you need to kind of open the window? Do you need to put the issue on the table of the government, or is the issue already acknowledged by the government? It's typically, I think, a shorter process if there's actually an open window, but sometimes the issue is still not like acknowledged by the government, and then you might need to start from the very basic and explain to the government why this question or why this issue needs to be changed. And the third area where I think it's really crucial to have knowledge is who the right people are to talk to, like make a mapping of the different stakeholders that are involved, understand at whose table is this question? Is it which government agency talks about these issues? Which ministers are concerned with these issues, and so on? To understand, like, if you want to explain the issue and how you are concerned to the government or the parliament or to policymakers at different institutions, then you need to have identified which those stakeholders are. So the first area where it's really important, I think, to have made a preliminary mapping is around knowledge. And then we can go to the next slide. The second area where I think it's really important to have to focus is to get friends. You need friends if you want to do any kind of reform, or if you want to advocate the policies in your country or region. Which organizations in your country or context work on the same or similar topic? I think it's really valuable if you can start to map which kind of stakeholders that are actually of similar opinions as you. Typically in Sweden, we have worked a lot with the library associations or cultural heritage institutions or user rights organizations. But I think it's really crucial to have a network or group of organizations that focus on similar topics. And even greater, I think it is if any of these organizations potentially could have in-house lawyers. So I mentioned in the previous slide that it's really helpful if you can identify solutions to the problems that you are facing. My experience is that policymakers, lawmakers prefer getting solutions than only complaints and everything that's bad. But if you want to have and find a good solution to the issue, then you might need to have some legal backing. And we're not the richest, most wealthy movement in the world, so there might be allies, potential allies in our networks that actually have in-house lawyers when we might lack them. And if you find an organization that actually has an in-house lawyer that could help you with developing the policy proposal, then I think that you have a really good beginning for your advocacy work. It might also be good to map different politicians and journalists that have worked on similar topics or issues. If the table motions for amendments are publicly available on the website, look through which politicians that have proposed any changes or reforms on similar topics. Is there any journalists that have written about the issue in the media? Reach out to them, or if not, perhaps organize a seminar with journalists to explain why this is a problem. Reach out to different politicians that might be in relevant positions to work on this topic, and so on. I think if you have like-minded organizations, politicians, and journalists on your side, then you have a really, really good early beginning for your advocacy journey. And then we can go to the third, or to the next slide. The third crucial thing I think in terms of successful advocacy, and it's quite boring, unfortunately. I think it's really crucial as well to actually have resources to make the advocacy that we are doing. I mentioned that we began this journey in Sweden 8 years ago. We set our goals in 2016, and now we are in a situation where we can actually see a potential win or potential government reform. It takes a lot of time to do advocacy, especially if the windows are not already open, so to say. The efforts need to be sustainable. Like if you want to achieve like a legislative change, you need to be in it for the long run. So you need to have sustainable efforts. It might be hard to do this if you're if you're a volunteer, because we all as volunteers lack time. So if there's any possibility for getting any funding for advocacy work, I think that's really helpful. Are there any domestic funds that you can apply for? Any regional funds that you can apply for? Can you apply for funding from the foundation? As Siski also previously mentioned in the chat, there is the possibility to get funding from the foundation now for public policy work. I think it's really important to look around and see if there's any funding that could be secured for advocacy work, and especially if you're in a situation where the question that you want to focus on is not already on the table locally. So these are 3 different insights. that I have made from these soon 8 years of advocacy work in Sweden. I hope they make sense for you, and if there's anything unclear, I hope it can be clarified when I now try to go a bit into the journey that we did from Wikimedia's Sverige's side. So you can go to the next slide. In 2016, when we got water over our heads. I'm not sure if that makes any sense in English at all, but in English, in Swedish, we have this saying to get water over one's head, which typically means that you're faced with the task that is that you feel is larger than what you can manage. So in 2016, we ended up in a situation with a really big task that felt like completely overwhelming. I also think that this photo is from 2016. Might have been a good choice. I think it's Michael Phelps or something like this, a US champion from the Olympics in Rio, who obviously got water over his head before winning the gold medal in the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro. So I want to bring you on the journey from 2016, when we had a lot of water over our heads, to where we are today, where we can hopefully achieve some wins in the Swedish legislative copyright reform. So we can go to the next slide. What happened back in 2016? It was actually quite an overwhelming situation for us as a chapter. We ended up with the case in the Supreme Court that's typically in Sweden nowadays called the Wikimedia ruling. We were sued by the Visual Art Society, a collective management organization combining visual artists, and they won, which also meant that we lost somewhere between 100 and 150,000 euros or dollars, which also was all the liquidity that we had as an association. So we were close to bankrupt and really in shackles as an affiliate. It was a really difficult situation, but also a situation where we got a big mission to actually change the law and make sure that what we couldn't do after the Wikimedia ruling would sooner or later be allowed. I'll explain this a bit in more detail in a few moments, but there were actually two things that happened in 2016, and I shortly want to mention the other one as well, so we can go to the next slide. So in 2016, we lost the court case in the Supreme Court, but it was also the early days of our work on something that typically has been called the CDSM directive, or the Copyright in the Digital Single Market Directive. It's a directive from the European Union that harmonizes a lot of copyright issues on a European level. And a few of the provisions are really problematic. Some of them are really good, and most of them, as typically, are somewhere in between. But because it was such a comprehensive reform that also gave a lot of possibility for us in Sweden during the implementation into Swedish law for changing things that were otherwise problematic from our perspective. There are a few provisions, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them at all, but there were a few provisions that had large impacts on users' rights, for example, and users' possibilities to share material on a digital scale. So we identified this as an important opportunity to start to build a common Swedish network and involve ourselves at a deeper level in copyright advocacy than what we had done before. So on the one side, we had a really problematic ruling from the Supreme Court that meant a huge financial loss and first, unfortunately, quite a few of our staff to go. But on the other hand, we also had a big opportunity to start to position ourselves as central copyright advocacy actors. And I think that both the Wikimedia ruling and the work around the CDSM directive meant an opportunity to get in a central position for advocacy work. So we can go to the next slide, which kind of refers back again to the copyright network that I mentioned as crucial, like building friendships, partnerships, getting to know the other people in the area that might have similar opinions as you. So we used the opportunity with both the Wikimedia ruling and the CDSM directive to build quite a comprehensive network of allies and friends on copyright advocacy. And we especially developed this network for the implementation of the Copyright and the Digital Single Market Directive, and brought together, as I mentioned, library organizations, cultural heritage organizations, user rights organizations from large parts of society into one and the same network. And we were also the coordinators, or are still the coordinators of this network, together with the National Library. And coordinating together with this network has put us in a really central positions among stakeholders in Sweden. And when we worked actively with the implementation of this EU directive, that also in the end resulted in several of those allies actually referring back to us in the public consultation. So, for example, if an organization might only have focused on one or two issues in their written response to the consultation, then a few of them actually ended by saying, and for the rest, we agree with the positions put forth by Wikimedia Sverige, Wikimedia Sweden. So when we had 4 or 5 different organizations writing to the government that they agreed with the position that Wikimedia Sweden put forth, then I think that the government finally realized that if you want to have a good law, then you need to listen to Wikimedia Sverige. So building this kind of network and coordinating this network was, of course, important because it meant that more organizations shared our work, but in the end, it also meant that we were seen as being in a more central position when it came to copyright legislation. So we can go to the next slide, which will kind of go back again to the Supreme Court issue. And I'll try to be as brief as possible about this, but the case that we lost in the Supreme Court was, of course, on freedom of panorama. We had developed a database that was called offentligkonst.se, pretty much publicart.se. It was a non-commercial database with open data from municipalities across Sweden on public art. Like, where is the public art located? When was it built? Or when was it put in the permanent place? Who is the author? And so on. But the issue was that we also linked to images on Wikimedia Commons of these public artwork. And we were sued by the Visual Art Society for copyright infringement because they thought that this was not legal under the Swedish freedom of panorama provision. And this was the first time that freedom of panorama in Sweden was tested. And unfortunately, the Visual Art Society won, because it was the first time that this was ever tested in the Supreme Court. This also set the precedent for all future rulings. It set the precedent for the freedom of panorama, but also another legislative kind of principle in the copyright law that's called the 3-step test. And if we go to the next slide, I just want to mention a very few words on the 3-step test, because I think it's crucial to understand as Wikimedians the impact that the 3-step test has on copyright in general. It's a copyright principle from the Berne Convention, which is kind of the fundamental copyright convention on a global level. Most countries in the world have adhered to the Berne Convention. The 3-step test is also increasingly included in free trade agreements and other kind of international instruments. But there's and on a very fundamental level, the idea with the 3-step test is to find a balance between the rights of the rights holder and the rights of the public. So the 3-step test is the foundation for what's called the fair use system, for example, in the US, or fair dealing provisions that might exist in many parts of the world. But in Europe, this 3-step test has taken a really dangerous version in the EU directive that's called the InfoSoc directive, or the Information Society directive, that is 20 years old or something. So this 3-step test of the InfoSoc directive limits how widely you can interpret the the exceptions and limitations in EU law. And the most dangerous part, I think, with the Supreme Court decision in Sweden was that they interpreted this three-step test in an even more narrow way than what the Infosoc Directive has done. So they specifically said that all technical innovation based on an exception or limitation in the copyright law should benefit the creator. So as soon as you try something new or do some kind of technical innovation, this should benefit the creator and not the public. And we all know, I mean, I think what we are doing as a Wikimedia movement is to innovate and try out new things on how we can reach more people with information in the digital era. So the freedom of panorama provision meant that we couldn't anymore work with this public database. We couldn't crowdsource imagery and information about public art, but we could also, not on any exception and limitation, do any general kind of work that would mean technical innovation. And this case set the precedent, which meant that any time that the Swedish court would interpret freedom of panorama or the three-step test, they would need to refer back to the Wikimedia case. So we were in a position where core parts of our activities could be threatened by the Wikimedia ruling. So all this together meant that we decided already back in 2016 and 2017 that we would need to focus a lot on changing the freedom of panorama provision and the three-step test in the Swedish law. We can go to the next slide. And that kind of leads us to where we are at this position, where we have done a comprehensive work to reform exceptions and limitations in Swedish copyright law. So generally, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the principles of exceptions and limitations, but typically the copyright law will formulate a series of provisions of the rights of the rights holder, and then follow those provisions stating the rights holder rights with the rights of the public. So the cases where someone can use a copyrighted work without the explicit agreement from the rights holder. And this is called exceptions and limitations to copyright law. Those exceptions and limitations in the Swedish copyright law were written in the 1960s. So it's not really weird that a few of the exceptions and limitations ended up in really weird court rulings. And what we did was that we teamed up with other organizations in our wider network to try to explain to the government why these outdated exceptions, why these outdated provisions caused a lot of issues for the general public. So we could focus on the freedom of panorama provision, Swedish television, like the public television agency ended up in a very weird court ruling over news reporting and parody, and there were a few different exceptions and limitations that were obviously outdated. We didn't have any parody exception at all, for example. I tried to find one parody on Wikimedia Commons that would be fun and enlightening, and the only one that I found from Sweden was the one that you can see on the screen. So it doesn't really have anything with anything to do, but it's at least a parody. But we had like a series of exceptions and limitations that were obviously outdated, and we tried to say to the government that, hey, we need to have a proper process for reforming the exceptions and limitations in the Swedish copyright law. And we tried to get the government to do this already while implementing the CDSM directive, but they said that they wouldn't have time for this during the implementation. The EU said that we needed to implement it during 2 years, and it was a very comprehensive directive. So then we, together with a lot of other organizations, said that then we should have a reform process after the implementation is done with the CDSM directive to review the exceptions and limitations in the Swedish copyright law. And that leads us to the next slide. The government listened and appointed a public inquiry A public inquiry is kind of the first step of a Swedish legislative reform. So it's the government that appoints a public inquiry that has the mandate to look into a certain chapters in the Swedish law and then leave a proposal to the government. And this proposal to the government is the foundation of the government proposal or the government bill to do a proper legal reform. And I added, I'm not sure if you can see this at all, but the image to the left is the government decision to appoint this public inquiry into the exceptions and limitations in the Swedish copyright law. And under this, you can see a few names, and these are the experts in this public inquiry. My last name is Luth, first name Eric, and you can see me as one of the experts in the public inquiry. So this meant that the government appointed me to this public inquiry to look into all the exceptions and limitations in the Swedish copyright law. And I think this is the most central position that we have ever had as an affiliate when it comes to advocacy, because that meant that we could sit in the room where the law is being written together with a group of other experts and influence the direction of the legal reform. And the inquiry led to the report, which you see on the right hand, which is the public inquiry report handed over to the government on 19th January this year to reform the exceptions and limitations in the Swedish copyright law. And I hope I managed to explain this clearly enough. There's a lot of information in a short amount of time. And if there's any question, I'm more than happy to reply to this. But with this, I'd like to go to my last slide, which is a few of the, like going back to the first one about the importance of knowledge in the work that we are doing, that you need to have knowledge. And I want to stress that again. I think it's the most important aspect of doing advocacy. You need to have knowledge about the issues that you're advocating around. And one thing that I have realized that it takes years to get into the last room, into the room where laws are actually being written. But when you are in that last room, you're not alone anymore. Your government might listen to you, but your government will also want to listen to the other side. And your foe, your adversary, whatever you might call them, will be on the other side of the table. And they will, of course, push as hard for their views as you will do for yours. Are there any potential, like, is there a compromise that you can do at all? Like, what are the potential compromises that you might need to do and that you could accept with your foe and the government? Are there any compromises at all? Are there areas where you cannot compromise? Like, are there any red lines or whatever you call this in English? Are there things that you by no means can accept? If you know what the room for compromises and your red lines are, then you have a really good foundation for kind of winning in the final room. And for the parts on which you cannot compromise, I think it's especially important to have really strong arguments to explain why you cannot compromise on this. The government, like your foe doesn't need to understand, but the government needs to understand why they should listen more to you than they should do to your foe. So perhaps these are my final words. Knowledge is important, and I think that the work that Siski and others are doing to compile and gather insights and work from across the movement is extremely important. We have done a lot of impressive advocacy work across the globe. We are those peasants that go together against the, I don't know, the large industries and whatever. We're not alone in this. So if we can start to collaborate and share best practices and insights across the movement, then I think we're in a really good position to actually ensuring better outcomes of the advocacy work. So I think that's it. And thanks for me and today.
Amazing. Thank you, Eric. My first question is, what is the name of the amazing animal on the slide with the long nose and the big eyes? Because it's so cute, and I don't know what it is, but I love it.
I think that was the most difficult question. I don't remember.
Yeah, I feel like marmoset, but I think I'm making that up. If anyone has any ideas, let me know. It's a lemur. Yes, Ziski, it's a lemur. I couldn't see its tail, so I was like, You know, I have a dress with lemurs on it. I should have worn it today to be thematically accurate. Thank you so much, Eric. That was fascinating. We have 3 questions on the Jamboard, which I can share. Let me just, oh no, someone else is doing it. Amazing. Let's go clockwise from the top left. So the first question is one that maybe you have answered to an extent, Eric, but if you want to kind of respond to this, it's why did Wikimedia Sweden continue to engage in and prioritize advocacy work?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, when we lost the court case in 2016 and 2017, that was like a huge blow to the affiliates, like in terms of finances and in terms of like mainly in terms of finances perhaps, and of course from a legislative, like from a legal point of view, because we couldn't engage in public art anymore, and there was no there was this really dangerous precedent for the 3-step test that I mentioned. But I think that we kind of won the public battle. Like Visual Art Society won the ruling, but they didn't win the acceptance in the public. So we felt that we had clear and defined areas in the law that were really problematic, and we also had a large public backing. Like this was actually a really big thing, and when it happened back in 2016 and 17. So it was, in a sense, like a clearly defined important area of work, and where we felt that people, like the public and a lot of politicians, are on our side. So it like didn't make sense not to use the opportunity. If that makes sense as a reply.
I think so. I also just put a picture of a lemur on the page for everyone just to refresh your memories. Thanks, Eric. I'm going to skip over to the far right-hand side here. What was the biggest barrier to entry or the biggest learning experience for the chapter when you got involved in advocacy for the first time?
I think copyright altogether is a big barrier. Like, and I mean, when you did the previous slide on like what people think about when they think about copyright, and like people say like you do scary, fear, difficult. Like most of us are not lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. Like,
yeah,
it's difficult. It's a lot of word. Like, who on earth knows what a 3-step test is? Like, the case said, as I mentioned, the precedent, but I didn't even know that the 3-step test was like the most like damaging part of the court ruling before, like until several years into the process. So I think that it is difficult, and that's also again why you need allies, and you need to work with other organizations that might have more experience or more knowledge than you do. Like we are experts on the platforms and how they work, but few of us are expert on national copyright law. And I think, yeah, that altogether is, I think, a big barrier for a lot of us, and definitely for us as a chapter.
I think I'm not a lawyer is the litany of like people working in Commons and advising on this. I'm currently doing the Creative Commons GLAM certificate, which is an amazing course. Recommend to all Wikimedians if it's something you're interested in. I don't know if Evelyn is still here, but I know Evelyn's involved in it as well. But the first thing you have to kind of recite is, I am not a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I cannot give legal advice. Now I see Evelyn's hand is up actually, so I'm gonna pass to Evelyn briefly and then come back to the other 2 questions. So Evelyn, if you'd like to come on mic, feel free.
Oh no, I'm just like I'm sorry. I did that just to say that I was here and that I'm like,
oh hello.
Thank you for yeah, thank you for showing some love, right? Because like I think it's the second time you've mentioned me, but like if I might, like, use a little bit of this opportunity, like, can I ask a question for Eric?
Absolutely. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. So, like, Eric, I think like this is like a super interesting case, and I know that Douglas like has done a lot of work too, like around freedom of panorama. But like looking at those two cases, I think like kind of my question is, so like the European context is like so specific in a lot of ways, right? Because you do have like a lot of legislative, like different bodies that like agree on legislation and law. And so what are sort of the things that from your experience working in the European Union, which again is a very specific context, what are those things that you think are like translatable or like that other countries like could learn about that do not apply necessarily to the European context? Like, I don't know if my question is clear, but like in a way, how do we translate like those case studies into other contexts?
Thanks, Evelyn. I think that's a great question. I mean, I mentioned the Berne Convention in the slide or in the presentation, I think. I mean, and which is an international convention which most of the countries in the world have signed up to. So in a very like on a very basic level, like a lot of copyright laws look quite similarly across the globe. So I think a lot of the learnings and a lot of insights we are doing are translatable. The EU version of the three-step test is really troublesome, but I think that like that version is also included in a lot of free trade agreements on a global level. So it's unfortunately sometimes also spreading elsewhere. So a lot of the insights are quite translatable, I think. A few of the parts that are difficult to translate perhaps is the processes and procedures like in the European Union, because it's like a quite special mix of what is happening on a union level and what is happening on a national level. I'm not sure if my answer makes any sense, but I think the processes and procedures might be challenging to translate, but the kind of hard materia, the law, I think we can translate a lot of the insights and experiences.
Brilliant. Thanks, Eric. Two of the post-it notes have the same question on them. Now, we're scheduled to run questions until 16:35 and then do some resource sharing. I'm going to use my prerogative here and say we might take 5 more minutes of questions here, so go up to 16:37. With that timing in mind, how do you identify your allies?
It's a great question. I don't think it's like thing that you do on one occasion, like you sit down and just do a mapping and then you're done and then you have identified your allies. I think it's more like a continuous process. So there are a few allies that I think are quite logical, like on a global level. Like we work a lot, as I mentioned, with the library association. Like librarians, I think, are very close to our mission. Creative Commons, like Rahmat mentioned from Indonesia, is also like a logical early ally. And then the more work that you are doing, then you might, move wider and wider in the networks. And perhaps like the first allies that you have might be allies on very many different aspects. And then the more work that you do, then you realize that you might have a really strong ally in one question, and they are on the complete different side of the table if you move to another question. So, for example, I think I mentioned that we have worked a bit with the public television in Sweden, and we are really close to each other on a few exceptions and limitations, but perhaps much further away on others. So they are perhaps less obvious an ally than other actors could be. So I think it's about like it's really good to make an early mapping with a few allies, and then as you go along, you might come across new potential allies, new potential partners in the work that you are doing. And your partners might also know of other partners that are good to join into the network. So I think it's very much of a continuous process that will need to shift a bit according to the context and situation.
Thank you so much, Eric. How much is large public involvement in your opinion? Oh, sorry, I see Ziski has their hand up. Ziski, if you want to come in, please do.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that it can also be really, really useful to work with unlikely allies. Eric mentioned a public broadcaster. I think that does count as a typical ally for the Wikimedia Foundation, since they're going to be supportive of open access knowledge, probably a little more than other groups. But if Wikimedia organizations find a scenario where it's useful to work with an ally that's really surprising, some of the benefits that you can get is media attention. You will also perhaps get legislators' attention or government officials paying attention, because they're like, hold up, this is a strange combination. Maybe we should really take a moment to listen to what these guys have to say. And they'll also have very different contacts than Wikimedia groups usually do. And so you have an information sharing benefit there.
Amazing. So we have time for, I think, 2 more questions. I think I'd be interested to ask, how much is large public involvement in your opinion?
Like media outreach and working with, do I understand that question correctly?
Good question. I'm guessing the person is asking what constitutes large public involvement. So how can, rather than just like mild interest, what would be a good amount, a larger kind of engagement? What kind of scale are we talking?
Yes, I was writing this question. I was really just thinking if it can be useful to, for example, organizing conferences, organizing people events, or is better to focus on having contacts with journalists, politicians, high level.
Yeah, that makes, thanks. That makes a lot of sense. Like, I think it's a question about how much funding you have, or like how much funders allies might have. I think it's really helpful to put things on the agenda. Like if you are a group of 5 or whatever allies that do a large conference together, and these allies are like important in this field of work, then I think that the government will listen. So it might, like, I think conferences are typically really helpful if you have the funding. Like writing a op-ed or like a piece like in a journal might also be a good way to do it. Like, I think it's important, but to what level you do it might depend on how much funding that you have, because it also, like a conference, for example, takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, like especially if you're doing like a public physical event and not a webinar or so. So it's important, but it's like you need to kind of balance it with the amount of funding and time that you have.
Amazing. I'm going to conclude our questions here. Thank you so much, Eric, for your time answering those. We may have time to come back to the final 2, but what we have scheduled now is for Eric and Rahmat to share any tools or resources that they found particularly useful in their advocacy. Are there any particular things that you would like to share, Rahmat, resources, anything like that our participants may want to know more about?
Thanks, Lucy. Probably with regard to public domain resource or materials, we have made some summary regarding the copyright advocacy that we have also publicized in the resource that Ziski has put it in the global advocacy page. You can find some of the resources there about our publication. And I would like to show you some of the brief summary of how we can decide some works in Indonesia that has already been entered the public domain. So I have put the link in the chat, but it is in Indonesian. First, so I need to translate it to English if I have the enough time to do that. But you can find some of the items that it is constitute the public domain, but there are some illustration that how you can calculate the specific word that it is copyrightable, but you can calculate what years that it will enter the public domain, and also some of the work that already been done by the Creative Commons Indonesia and also with the Institute regarding the public domain. I can show you some of the materials here. This is some guidance that published by the Institute Indonesia. It is some books, some resource books that it is intended to an institution in Indonesia on how they can consider that the public the collection from the collection from the museum or land institution can be published to the internet, but this is not really all of our publication, and I'm happy to share some more of them if you are interested in other kinds of channels or in the Let's Connect channel. So, thank you, Lucy.
Excellent. Eric, do you have any off the top of your head that you'd like to share?
I can just mention one thing maybe that I think is like valuable for our movement altogether. Like I mentioned several times in my presentation the importance of knowledge. And I think we all agree as Wikimedians that knowledge is important, but it's also knowledge about the advocacy that you're doing. And there's quite a few different courses and training sessions on a global level in copyright questions. Ivan from Wikimedia Mexico and I took part in a summer school at the University of Amsterdam, like last summer. And I know that Douglas Scott, who was mentioned from South Africa, took part in a similar course at Harvard, I think. A lot of these are like covered by scholarships, like if you apply and successfully, and there's sometimes even possible to get funding for travel and lodging and so on. Like I think it's really valuable for you as a person, as like doing copyright advocacy, to take part in these courses. But I also think it's really good if Wikimedians are like show up on such courses, because that also kind of puts us in a central position in copyright advocacy on a global level. So it's good both for the Wikimedia movement to be seen in those circumstances, but also for like us as advocates to take part in the courses. So that would maybe, I'm not sure if that is a direct answer to your question, Lucy, but I think it's like there are different courses that are really valuable, and I think it's good to attend them.
No, it's excellent. It's really, really good. And I always just wish that I could give everyone the gift of a time machine or a magic clock so that we could do all of these things, because they all sound just wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those. If it's okay with my co-hosts and with our participants, I'd like to we've got about 10 or so minutes to play with, and there are a couple of questions that went unanswered from the Jamboard that I'd like to come back to for both Rahma and Eric, because I think they apply to both presentations. While the Jamboard's coming up, does anyone have anything they'd like to ask on mic or share otherwise through Zoom? Silence. Garan, if it was possible to share the Jamboard again, that would be great. I have a brief question for both presenters. One that actually came up in our first copyright clinic as well. In both the experiences that you shared, both Wikimedia Indonesia and Wikimedia Sweden, did you encounter any misconceptions about Wikipedia? I mean, I think I know the answer will be yes, but I'm interested to hear what in particular you hit against and how you dealt with that. I'll pass this to Eric first, then to Rahmat, if that is okay.
Yeah, it's a crazy amount of misconceptions. I think that the one that I have had to challenge most of the time, that Wikipedia is a business model, that we're a business like running on a commercial level. Like, oh, but it's not a, like, why do you need an exception? You can just pay for the material. I mean, you have a lot of funding. It's like, no, it's an NGO. It's driven by a foundation. It's non-commercial. Like, so many people, like also in the government or at copyright offices or whatever, have no clue how Wikipedia works, and especially that it's not run on a commercial scale. I think that would be the most typical misconception. Not really hard to answer to, because they are wrong, but all the time.
The secret Wikimedia piles of money that nobody admits to, that don't exist. Rahmat.
Well, it seems that we have the same thing in Indonesia, but there are additional things that I would like to highlight about the misconception of Wikipedia. Generally, the university lecturer thinks that Wikipedia is not trusted because they are open, they can be edited by anyone else, and the Wikipedia pages, Wikipedia articles cannot be taken as the resource, specifically for the thesis or something like that. But Wikimedia Indonesia is hosting several editathon and also some session on how we on how we can make it clear for everyone else, especially for the university students and lecturers on how Wikipedia works, because Wikipedia is, even though Wikipedia is open, everyone can edit on Wikipedia, but there are some mechanisms that Wikipedia has. For example, there are edit history, specifically some pages that already there to see who edits the articles, and also what times they edit the Wikipedia. And also we also show that this is you can see that these people edit or add or remove this information on Wikipedia, and this can be tracked in the specific pages. We also ensure that Wikipedia, even though Wikipedia is open and it can be edited by anyone, we can see that Wikipedia can be trusted, and we can do some edit audit to see who changed one page or what times on what paragraph that people is edited. So this is some kinds of our effort from Wikimedia Indonesia that are still continuing until this.
Thank you so much, Rahmat. And Zisky assured that Rahmat just gave a big presentation on this, and that there are good resources to counter narratives in the resource centre, including a one-pager on the Wikipedia model, explanations of our model in our submission to the UN, language in the human rights impact assessment. We will, it should be said, be sharing all these resources with you after today's session. The final question is one that I think it's a big open-ended question that's going to only become more important in the coming years. And it may be one I think that Zisky may also have something to say about, which is, how do you transition from copyright advocacy to advocacy on other topics too, like privacy or AI, which are two of the real hot topics at the moment? Whichever of you would like to answer first, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I feel like I'm always talking a lot, but no one else seemed to open the mic, so I can share a few thoughts. Like from Wikimedia Sweden, I think it has been a combination of different things happening. One of them is, of course, like when you coordinate a network of organizations, like even though we are like-minded, we also have slightly different perspectives, which kind of forces you to realize that freedom of panorama, for example, is one. It's a very important issue, but it's one of very many important issues. So it kind of forced us to like it meant that other allies can perhaps realize the freedom of panorama is more important than they thought previously, but also forced us to realize that there are other issues that are of great importance as well. So like building a network and building partnerships kind of forced us a bit outside of our comfort zone to focus on slightly different questions as well. And then we were lucky enough to ensure funding for a few advocacy related projects like non-Wikimedia funding, which also kind of meant that we had to align with the goals and the ambitions of those funders, which obviously were like closely aligned with the Wikimedia movement as well. So it wasn't to start to advocate for something completely different, but still kind of forced us to take half a step, like even more outside of our comfort zone. So a combination of changing society, perhaps, of increasing networks and partnerships and different and requirements from different funders. I think that kind of made us take a transition into other topics.
Brilliant. Rahmat or Ziski, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah,
I
Ziski?
asked, so Rahmat, please go.
Okay. Thank you. So what we have done so far regarding the advocacy transition from copyright to other topics, it's similar to Eric as well, because Wikimedia Indonesia collaborate with other institutions, just like we work together with Goethe Institute, because they are currently focused on the topic of AI, and in the public domain day celebration last month, we also joined forces with them to bring the awareness about AI, but we connect with the copyright issue regarding the AI generative content. So in this scenario, in this mechanism, we try to build our partnership with other organizations in Indonesia, and we can do some transition or do several kinds of advocacy regarding on the topic that they are focusing on, and if it is related as well with the Wikimedia communities. For example, we still doing some efforts to do some introduction to push our law about the freedom of panorama in Indonesia, and we have been speaking with some of the higher ranking officials in the ministry regarding how we can change or amend the law that are currently do not have doesn't have any provision about the clear provision about the freedom of panorama in Indonesia. And I think that how we transition, because this is related to the number of the organization that we are collaborating on.
Thanks, Rahmat. Ziski, is there anything you'd like to add in the couple of minutes we've got?
No, just thank you so much to the presenters. I guess what I would highlight is that you've heard two really interesting, I think, case studies of what Wikimedians just like you are doing on public policy advocacy. And I hope that that's inspiring, but really it's the tip of the iceberg, because Wikimedia Sweden and Indonesia are just two examples. And there's a lot of other Wikimedia groups doing really important work on advocacy. And I have the wonderful job of trying to bring those people together and make sure that everybody else in the movement is aware of the work they're doing, can learn from it, and we can share all the insights and lessons and also materials that are created along the way. So please watch the Global Advocacy Spaces. I think this is something that the foundation hasn't invested in a lot before, but we really are now. And that's a message that I want to make sure it gets across, so people know we're trying to do this work and bring everybody together.
Yeah. Thanks, Iski. We're not to make Anthony, Chin, myself, Garana sound really good, we're running to time today. So I'm feeling quite smug. So that means I'm going to share my screen now, because what I'd like to do is give you all a link to a Mentimeter. This Mentimeter scientifically will take you about, I would say, 1 minute to 90 seconds to complete. And if you can complete it for us, that would be fantastic, because it means we can feed back to the foundation why Let's Connect is important, and why we should be allowed to keep running clinics like these. So you'll just be asked simple questions about whether or not this session was useful for you, whether it included what you expected to learn, and how easy it was to understand. Oh, look at that, we're off to a flying start. And there are a couple of other questions in there about words you would use to describe what you learned today, and so on. The more people that respond to this, all the better for us. We love having your feedback and being able to share with our presenters and our team what we can do better to better support you. The next question is, just to give you an idea of what you're signing up for when you click the link. My computer clearly doesn't like the power of feedback, because it always gets upset when I try to open a Mentimeter. It gets annoyed with me. But yeah, an important learning you took from the Learning Clinic, and how you would rate your understanding and enjoyment of the clinic. Those are the questions that will be asked. If you can take a couple of minutes to do that, that would be wonderful, because if you're anything like me, you will not do this. You will aim to do it later, and you will never get around to actually doing it, which is my attitude towards these things, more often than not. I'm going to stop sharing my screen before my computer explodes. If one of my colleagues, perhaps Garana, could share our main deck just for the last couple of slides to say thank you. I would like to say a big thank you to Eric and to Rahma for sharing with us today. If you'd like to show your appreciation for Eric and Rahma, either by silent applause, sharing a clapping emoji, or coming on mic to just put your hands together, that would be wonderful. I'm always very proud of these clinics, proud of you all for coming along, and of the good work that you're all doing. I should say this was the second of 2 clinics. The first was with Wikimedia Italia and Wikimedia Colombia. The resources for that clinic and the recordings will be available on our resources page within the next week. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to our interpreters, who are always so supportive of the work we do. They look over our materials in advance so that we have them there for you all to read. They do simultaneous translation, with all of us talking a million miles an hour about Wikimedia and all the things we love about it. So thank you so much for being in the room with us. Please give yourselves a big round of applause. It is 2 minutes to 5 o'clock where I am in Scotland. The sun is setting. It's very beautiful. I'm feeling very full of wiki love. And I would ask at this point, we will stop the recording, and you are all welcome to come on mic and on camera to make a little bit of noise before we all head off our separate ways. So thank you all